It's time for baseball's last frontier, stories from the Pecos League, the podcast that will open your door to baseball's entry level, telling you the stories of the teams, players, and coaches of an independent minor league circuit. I'm your host, Bruce McClure, and I have the pleasure of introducing to you my friend, partner, and co-host, Evan Katz. Evan, why am I getting up at dark 30 for this one today?
Oh my goodness! Well, you've got a paying job, Bruce, so that's part of it. And I'm in. This is our 10th podcast. I think we're going to have a celebration after the show. Also, the 5th state that I've been in since we started this podcast back in May. I was the pitching coach with the Roswell Invaders. Unfortunately, had a family medical emergency and had to return home. But we've kept the podcast going, talking to players, coaches, host families. And right now, I am in North Platte, Nebraska, the home of the North Platte 80s, an expansion team this year. The reason I'm here is I worked with the manager who we spoke to a few weeks ago, Todd Everleft, to help him get the job. But I was hoping to meet him in Roswell this summer. Obviously, it didn't work when I had to leave early, so I decided to come out here and meet Todd. And so we're spending a little bit of time together, and in preparation for my trip to North Platte, I asked him if he had any potential guests to help us get a different angle on the Pecos League. And he suggested the Pecos TV broadcaster, Harmon Johnsen, who lives about 20 miles away from North Platte in a town called Sutherland. So I got hooked up with Harmon through Todd and connected with Harmon. And now I have added to my resume, not just being a professional player in the Pecos League, a professional coach in the Pecos League. Harmon was kind enough 2 nights ago to invite me to join him as a broadcaster. So I am now a professional baseball broadcaster, thanks to Harmon Johnsen. So welcome to baseball's last frontier, Harmon.
Well, Bruce and Evan, I really appreciate the opportunity to come on. I didn't realize this was show number 10. I listened to Todd's interview in preparation for this one, but I didn't realize we were already at double digits. That's amazing. And yeah, that broadcast you came on Thursday night, that was a big help for me because my usual color commentator was out of town. So I'm glad you had a great time coming on the broadcast. And I guess I didn't even realize that you could add that to your list of Pecos League involvements now too. That's pretty cool.
It's great. Well, I really appreciate it. And, you know, for those of you that you won't know this, Harmon is going to be a sophomore in college. I'm 68 years old, so we're in the broadcast booth with 50 years spanning baseball, and it was a real treat to be with someone who was so comfortable technically and understood baseball, had all of his pages spread out to help him broadcast the game, enter the game into the league scoring app. Harmon, can you tell us how did you end up broadcasting for Pecos League TV and the North Platte 80s? Just give us a little bit of history on your baseball media and your social media and your technology background that allowed you to step in for the 80s first season here.
Well, it's a little bit of a longer story, but it's all necessary. I can tell you that. I got my start in broadcasting when I was a senior in high school. One of the local radio stations in North Platte, I knew the guy that did a bunch of the basketball games, and my basketball team in high school was not great. So during our conference tournament, I asked him, hey, in the inevitable event that my team gets eliminated, can I come join you on the broadcast? This is something I'm thinking I want to do. And I ended up doing color commentary for 6 games the next day at our basketball tournament. And I fell in love with it. He invited me on to do my first couple of baseball games of color commentary later that spring. And then I made my commitment to go to the University of Nebraska Lincoln College of Journalism and Mass Communications. And if you research the CoJMC, what we call it, the motto on the website there is "Do from day one." And that was what I wanted to do. I wanted to go and get involved right away. I didn't want to take a bunch of tests. But what I didn't realize was when you go to UNL and you go to the College of Journalism, if you say you want to do something, they will give you opportunities as soon as you walk in the door. I think 2 weeks on campus, I called my first event. I did a live shot from a Husker hockey game, which is a club hockey team. I then did some high school volleyball, and then by about the midway point of my freshman year, I had called rather some high school volleyball, high school football. I think I even got to call one Husker volleyball. I don't know for sure. That's how much I've done. And then when basketball season rolled around, I got the opportunity to go to every single Nebraska Cornhuskers women's basketball game as a camera operator, because I work for Husker Vision, which is a production team that is basically all student run at the University of Nebraska. They do all of the big screen shows and staffing for the streaming service called Big Ten Plus. And so I got to go to a bunch of women's basketball games, got involved there. And then finally, when baseball and softball season rolled around, I was home for spring break, and I got a call from our Big Ten Plus coordinator asking, hey, do you want to come back early and call 2 games on the Big Ten Plus streaming software, which is basically a TV broadcast? And this was right before I had accepted the position to be the play-by-play announcer for the 80s. And I said, you know what, that would be really cool, and that would show the Pecos League, hey, I'm capable of doing a TV broadcast. And so as a freshman, something that not very many other people get to go do, I went back to Nebraska's Bolin Stadium, the softball stadium, and called back-to-back days of color commentary on Big Ten Plus. I then proceeded to do 6 more Big Ten Plus events as a freshman to bring my total to 8, along with various radio appearances in the baseball and softball broadcast. So all told, I think since my senior year, I've been a part of more than 70 broadcasts on the microphone alone. I've been probably professionally a part of sports at least more than 100 now. And I'm just getting started with my sophomore year. When the 80s job opened up, initially I didn't really want to apply because I wanted to try and take like a gap summer and just enjoy my remaining time as a teenager kind of. But then the 80s job, the play-by-play job never got filled. And finally I called up the commissioner and I said, hey, you know, I'm from the area. I would love to stay at home and do the broadcast to get some good innings of experience before I potentially try and move on. And so he called me back while I was in class, actually. I took the call, and it ended up being about a 40-minute phone call, but we got all the details hammered out, and that's kind of the story of how I became the broadcaster. But yeah, my broadcasting history, thinking back on it now with you guys, I actually had never really chronicled it like that before. And so I just am realizing just how much I've done, and I'm only a freshman. So.
Well, so Harmon, I will have to say that I did look at your LinkedIn profile. You've got one of the longest LinkedIn profiles for a 19-year-old, and I can see why.
Right?
So you know, you were talking to Commissioner Andrew Dunn. I was in touch with the commissioner many times, and I can understand when you get a call from the commissioner of a sports league, you take it no matter where you are. So I think that was a good move to leave class.
Yep.
So I want to ask, you know, when you were describing your experiences, it sounded like you were part of a team. You had some people handling the technical aspects. And one of the things that I noticed as we prepared for the game the other night at Bill Wood Field here in North Platte. Bill Wood Field, of course, dates back to the mid-1950s. It's a historical field. It's a great thrill to be there up in the press box overlooking the field. I met you at the field. We had a lot of equipment to bring in. I'm there looking at my notes, and I'm looking over to my side, you're plugging things in, you're giving me a headset. All of a sudden, I see pieces of paper coming out. You've got sheets, you've got tables. It seems like this is a little bit more of a one-person operation as opposed to working for or as part of a team. Can you describe a little the difference between, looks like pretty much a solo operation here in North Platte versus the teamwork that you were doing building up to this?
Yeah, so Husker Vision is a lot of fun because you are in that team aspect. You get to know who else is on cameras and who's in the control room. You get to chat during the games on headset. So that's a really fun element of being a part of that team. And obviously with Husker Vision, majority of my time has been spent behind the camera instead of on the mic, which behind the mic is ultimately my end goal. But being able to be in that team setting, you get to focus a lot more on one aspect of the game, and your production ends up being the best it possibly can be. But when you take a summer baseball job anywhere, unless you're going to be in minor league baseball on the higher levels and then Major League Baseball, the reality is you're going to have to figure out how to do it by yourself. And that's not a bad thing for a broadcaster. To be able to run a operation and a production by yourself, but still have it look good is probably one of the biggest accomplishments a broadcaster can have. Because if you go into a smaller job like local radio, stuff like that, you're going to have times where you're going to be the only person up there in the stands running the broadcast. And if there's a video element involved, like we have at Billwood Field, that just adds another challenge. But it's completely doable. You say it's kind of a solo effort up there. I can tell you 100% that this summer would not be what it is without the help of the two of the biggest people I've had help me. My dad, Dwayne Johnson, who you filled in for, is my usual color commentator. He also typically tackles the official scorebook like I was doing Thursday night. So that was a headache for me that I was not used to. And then my sister, Vivian, she has learned so much in the last just month and a half of how to run open broadcaster software, how to run the scorebug, how to move the camera for a baseball game. So while I could technically do it by myself, the reason it looks so good is because I have the help of those two people primarily. And of course, my brother and my mom, they come in and help periodically. And the night you were there, my grandpa was actually there keeping a paper book for me just in case point streak went down. So yeah, it's definitely a challenge doing it more by myself, but I've been blessed to have two people that are willing to help me every night and take time out of their summer schedules as well to come do the broadcast with me.
I mean, for people who might not have caught that, not only was Harmon broadcasting the game, it's not the official scorebook. He is the official scorer. And we know how important the official scorer is because a lot of times you have to make a decision where something is a hit or an error. I think the other night there was a play that was made, and I've got a lot of baseball experience as a player and a coach, and it sounded like it might have been a little bit of a debate or a little bit of a question. So I didn't speak up, but I chimed in by giving a hand signal to say I thought it might be an error to help push it in the direction that I thought. Harmon gets the final call, but I helped contribute to the scoring decision that went into the official Pecos League records.
Yeah, that was a tough play there that happened. The third baseman knocked the ball down, but then it went out into foul territory, and he wasn't able to throw. So I think we ultimately ruled it an error. I'd have to look, but yeah, that's the nuance that my dad has started to figure out. He is not a broadcaster by trade. He could do phone calls because he's been in sales and insurance for a long time. Now he's in outside sales with Woodhouse here in Nebraska. But he, before this year, had only ever done little tiny broadcasts with me for Legion Baseball, and that's nowhere near the same as this operation is. And so he has learned over the last month or so how to continue a thought, how to have a conversation while trying to put in the official score. And if he ever goes dark on the on the broadcast and it's just me talking for a little while, that's typically because something just happened on the field and he's trying to figure out in the official score.
So this is what I would call, and Bruce has described the Pecos League as the entry level to independent baseball. And so Harmon, there's not millions of dollars at stake. There aren't careers at stake. But here you are, a 19-year-old kid. You're talking to the players. They're older than you. You've got a manager here, Todd Everleth, who we interviewed a few weeks ago. He's more of a peer of mine. But you're up there broadcasting a game to family and friends, primarily watching on Pecos League TV. You're making official scoring decisions. Some of these players also, their stats could make a difference in whether a scout from the Pioneer League or Frontier League might take a harder look or maybe want to come to a game to watch one of the players. Is it difficult to make a decision, hit in an error, or is it a single with an error on the right fielder, or do I score that as a double? How much pressure do you feel to be a broadcaster, broadcasting to family and friends of the players who are playing and making scoring decisions on their professional baseball careers? How do you manage that as a 19-year-old just getting into the field?
Well, I will say that was the biggest thing that I told Andrew I was going to be concerned about, the commissioner. That was the biggest thing I told him. I said, it's going to be difficult for me to have a good broadcast and try and be doing all the official scoring at the same time. But just like you kind of chimed in with the decision on Thursday night, Dad and I, we have conversations either on the air or off the air about reasons why a play was a hit or an error or why we scored it a certain way. It's more of a team effort, really. I mean, I think I'm still classified as the official scorer, but I think Dwayne makes the decisions more than half the time, just because he has more baseball experience than I do, just being older than me. But that's the other thing that helps me kind of balance that is I've been around baseball for many years. I played, youth little T-ball and pony, and then I got hit by a pitch and I got out of it for a couple of years. I remember this vividly. But then I finally got back into it about a year before I started junior high, and ever since then, I've been a part of a baseball team or gone to baseball games. I also was also serving as the official scorer in the summer of 2022 for the back half of the season of the then team that was there, the North Platte Plainsmen. So I've been at Billwood Field for the last 3 summers in different capacities. This is the first year I've been doing a true broadcast, but last year was public address. The year before was music in the stadium music, and then I switched to official scoring after some interns got moved around. So just relying on my counterpart, relying on the baseball knowledge between the two of us, and that's probably the biggest thing that makes decisions. Now, it is you feel for these players when you're making scoring decisions because one or two more points on a batting average or a couple more RBI or one less error could potentially be the difference between them moving up to the next level. But the way we look at it is when we're scoring is, we feel for you guys, but this is also professional baseball, so we're going to score it as a professional ball player would. Because if you can't make plays in what's being described as this entry-level league, you're not going to be as valuable to a coach in an upper-level league if we're being inaccurate on your stats. So that's kind of how we balance that.
That's a good perspective. So Bruce, you and I have done 10 podcasts. I was at Roswell, and Roswell, there was professional baseball back to the 1950s here, same thing. And we've talked a little bit about the history of baseball here in North Platte, dating back to the Nebraska State League. And one of the things that Harmon and I talked about the other night was the local baseball history here and the fields that he played on. Can we wrap in some Nebraska baseball history here?
Wrap it in.
Oh, yeah.
The North Platte 80s here, the first professional team since 1959, and Harmon. Now, you did not play on Bill Wood Field, is that correct?
No, that's actually one of the only historical fields in this area of the state I did not get to play on, even though I played my high school ball about 12 miles west in Hershey, Nebraska, where Tucson held their spring training this year.
So those other fields we talked about the other night on the about 100 miles north of here in Valentine, Nebraska, a team called aptly named the Valentine Hearts. They were a franchise in the Basin League, which is a fairly prestigious summer college baseball league from the 1950s to the 1970s. Jim Palmer played there. Bob Gibson played there. Shout out to Jim Lomborg, 1967 Cy Young Award winner for the Boston Red Sox. He pitched there. And also Harmon Johnsen, you played there, right?
I did. The field up there, I believe it's still called Veterans Memorial Field. I don't know if it's the same exact field as it was back in the 70s or the 60s, I should say. But yeah, I've actually played up there. I think we were up there 3 separate occasions over my 4 years in high school ball. It's a really cool area up there in Valentine because it takes forever to get up there. You know, you're driving through nothing, no reception, and you come across the little town of Valentine after going across the Niobrara River, and you actually almost have to go out of town to get to the baseball field. I assume when the field was built, if it's the same location, it was kind of in the middle of nowhere, really. It was outside the city limits. The town's kind of grown up around it since then. I think there's a golf course out there now too, but it's a really unique location out there in the Sandhills. And I got to play, I think, one night game there. And when it gets dark up in the Sandhills, it's almost Field of Dreams-esque, I'll call it. I mean, you look out and you just see a couple of street lamps and then rolling sandhills lit by the moon. But it's a nice field. I was a little concerned my senior year when we went up there to play in the regular season. The field conditions were not great. There was grass in the infield. The mound was not good. But then they were hosting the district that year, so everybody that played there was kind of like, hey, you got to get the field ready. And it looks great now. They got a fresh load of dirt in the infield. They rebuilt the mound. They cut the grass. So, yeah, Valentine, that's one that I didn't realize hosted a lot of historical baseball. Mm-hmm. The one I'm sure we'll get to soon is the one more famous. But, yeah, Valentine is a really unique location.
Right. Yeah, Valentine, just to orient people. So North Platte, this is a big city here in west central Nebraska, population 23,000. Valentine, where Harmon was just talking about, population of 2,500. Just to let you know. So now we're west central Nebraska near the South Dakota border. We're gonna go about 100 miles west to the town of Rushville. Now this is Rushville.
Can you believe Nebraska expands that wide?
So Rushville at its peak, it's 100 miles west of Valentine. It's in the Panhandle, right, Harmon?
Yes, that is about as far into the Panhandle as you can get without going to Chadron or Wyoming or South Dakota.
So the population in Rushville at its peak in 1950 was 1,300. And there were 2 brothers in Rushville named Modisette. And what happens a lot of times in small towns, we have some families that make a lot of money from agriculture, cattle, minerals, and they really want to give back to the town. And the Modisette brothers built a number of municipal facilities, civic facilities for services and support of the residents. But they also built a baseball field. At the time in the late 40s, early 50s, baseball was America's pastime. And this is a game that people grew up with. So one of the things the Modisette brothers did was build a baseball field. They built a baseball field for the town, but it was a very good field. It was the only high-quality field in the area. And one of the residents had a connection with Frank Leahy. He was the brother of Frank Leahy, Notre Dame football coach, who had a connection with the Milwaukee Braves. And the Milwaukee Braves started holding a baseball camp. At this time in the early 50s, there were hundreds of minor league teams that were, and the 16 pro teams are trying to fill them up. And they were looking for players from everywhere. And they started holding annual baseball camps for 3 days in June. And players from 6 states in the area would flock to Rushville to be tutored on baseball. And Braves brought out to the camp Paul Wainer, who's one of the early Hall of Fame inductees, and at the time was one of the only 7 players to have 3,000 hits.
Yep.
Hundreds of players would descend on Rushville every summer to learn baseball. One player ultimately was signed that he won about 68 games in the minors. But this is a field that was a beacon. And the Yankees started doing the camps there. The Angels started doing the camps. And it was just a beacon for baseball in far western Nebraska for many, many years. And the field fell into disrepair. But I understand about 10 years ago, Harmon, the field was repaired and is now again a beacon for baseball.
Yeah, well, the story goes is the field had been being used after those camps had vacated, but then the field for some reason or another just slowly fell into disrepair. The grandstands were fading. The field condition needed to be completely updated. And then around that 10-year ago, I can't remember for sure, but there was a big donor that said, you know what, we're going to restore Modisette to its former glory. And a bunch of money went into that project to restore that park out there. And the Sheridan County Regulators, which is the Legion team for Gordon and Rushville up there, have hosted numerous district tournaments up there. And the feeling you get when walking into Modisette Park, if I can try and describe it for you, it's that one is probably more of the Field of Dreams feel. Like you're out in Rushville, Nebraska. It takes even longer to get to than Valentine, and that's a windy road you can only go 60 miles an hour on. And you get up there and you step into these major league style dugouts with a major league style grandstand replicated from the 1950s. And you look out to your left field side, there's an old football field, and then nothing. To your right field side, there's a couple of grain bins and the highway. And you just look out at the field, and it gives you a sense of awe that people from all over used to come into that ballpark and learn from major league greats at the time. I was lucky enough to go play up there a couple times. I believe they actually hosted a state tournament one year. Because the field was in such a great condition and they had the resources to host a state tournament for Legion Baseball Class C. So the joy of getting to play on that field where so many of the Milwaukee Braves legends played, I'm a Braves fan, so seeing that lineage there, seeing the lineage of powerhouse teams like the New York Yankees, drafting, or not drafting, but signing players, and teaching players in that camp and all that from that field. It was just a special treat to play on that field. I pitched on it once, and I believe I ended my career with 2 or 3 hits at that field. So it's a really cool treat, and there's actually a good spot to take photos too. The grandstands, you can go up on the roof of the grandstands, and you get a really, really picturesque view of the entire field.
So, out of curiosity, Harmon, I don't know if I asked you, did you ever play down in McCook?
I did not. That was one place we never really got on the schedule for one reason or another. Another bigger city compared to my team. We were Class C. I believe McCook was Class B for a majority of my high school years. I have driven by the baseball field there because at one point I was actually trying to go play college baseball down there for McCook Community College. I ended up not, but one of my teammates actually did go down there, so he would know that field better than me. But we played all over down there. We played in a little town called Elwood. We've been to Loomis, Nebraska, which is down that way. But yeah, I never did get a chance to go play McCook either.
Right. And during the broadcast the other night, we stayed in 2024, and then we would circle back to Nebraska baseball history from time to time. The reason I mentioned McCook is that it's a town that's in the book called A False Spring, written by Pat Jordan, a Milwaukee Braves bonus baby from 1959. I went down to McCook last night because last night's game was postponed. And as I stood on Main Street in McCook, I happened to have talked to Pat Jordan a couple of times, who's now in his 80s, living in South Carolina, and called him to tell him where I was, got him to tell me a few stories. I'll just tell one very, very quick one. So he played with the McCook Braves. Phil Niekro was on that team. Also Ron Hunt, New York Met, Montreal Expos, Elrod Hendricks, Baltimore Orioles. Phil Niekro's in the Hall of Fame. He told the story that the manager of the McCook Braves, Bill Steineke, was working with Phil Niekro. And Niekro, who was a knuckleballer, was not really that confident. He had just been signed, and he wasn't throwing his knuckleball enough, and he was getting hit pretty hard. And Pat Jordan relates the story that Niekro called Steineke calls Niekro into his office. He says, "Phil, what does your father do?" And Niekro answers, "My father works in the coal mines." And Steineke says to Niekro, "Phil, if you don't throw that knuckleball 100% of the time, you're going to be back working in the coal mines with your father." And of course, Niekro turned his season around, ended up winning, I think he won over 300 games and ended up in the Hall of Fame. But he got his start just down the road southwest of here in McCook, Nebraska.
I did not realize that he got his start in McCook. I knew you were talking about some other guys that had gotten their start in the Nebraska State League, but yeah, Phil Niekro is a big game, or a big name that even I know as a 21st century Braves fan.
That hurt, man. That hurt. You turned around and said, "Even I know that name." You just made me feel ancient. Come on. Oh my, that is too early in the morning for you to make me. I'm just going to jump right in here for you with questions. Oh
man.
I want to go back to you in the booth for North Platte, and you do all of what you do there. I know some official scorers from my time in minor league baseball here in New England, and my question for you is, how much of a student of the rule book do you have to be an official scorer, even in the Pecos League? Do you know the rule book chapter and verse?
Oh no, you will never stare at that rule book long enough to know everything every time. But again, that's where the communication between me and my dad, and sometimes the rest of the press box, because when we combine together, we can kind of talk through situations. We can, talk about stuff we've seen that's been ruled one way or ruled another way. And the Pecos League, the rule book's not much different than the regular Major League Baseball rules. It's even more similar now that the pitch timing rules came in effect at the start of July. So that's nice. The one difference, as everybody who's a fan of the Pecos League knows, is the pitcher's hit. But that's honestly not the hardest thing to deal with. But just being around the game, playing the game for 4+ years, having a dad who's my color commentator, who not only played when he was in high school, but has coached it. He coached me in high school. He's been around the game probably since he could throw a ball. And then just being able to communicate with everybody in the press box, either on the air or during breaks, to figure out what the right call is. And the joy we have is, because I'm doing a video stream, we can always highlight a play, go back, and if a player questions it, or if we're kind of questioning it, we can look at the play multiple times from the camera and have that benefit as well of,
yep.
In the moment, we thought it was this, but looking back on it, it really was this. And so we've done that a couple times, players asking about hits and errors, and those are the hardest ones. Hits and errors is by far the hardest thing to score. When you get a regular hit, that's easy to score. But when you get one of those that the fielder kind of gets a glove on and tries to make a throw and it's a close play, was it a good infield single or was it a bad read by the fielder, and so that's probably the most difficult thing. You hate taking hits away from these guys because everybody's goal in the Pecos League is winning games and moving up. And so they understand that they can't get a hit every time, but it is hard to tell some of these guys, hey, unfortunately, that was an error. We cannot, it would not be pure enough for a baseball person to call that a hit just to, essentially in the easiest way I could say, pad your stats, So it's just a matter of, again, being a student of the game in the playing sense and understanding how baseball works, and then just communicating with everybody who has that experience.
One of the things that I've learned over the years with the technological advancement of the sport is the fact that Major League Baseball scorers, let alone minor league baseball scorers now, have so much more data visually and honestly, hearing as well to get calls right. They also have the ability to go back at the end of a game or just like you said, during a game and correct what they feel are mistakes that they've made. It's the idea of being an official scorer has certainly evolved into a much more intricate science than it used to be. But now, as you're working and doing everything that you do in the box, what is the end game for you being a sophomore in college? Are you looking to get into baseball media or sports media when you leave college? What's your favorite part of this? What's the end game?
So I'm actually kind of modeling my career after one of my role models, Brandon Gaudin, who does play-by-play, ironically, for the Atlanta Braves. Now he took the Braves job. This is his second year. He does Atlanta Braves now in the summers, and he actually calls Big Ten and other games on the Fox networks for basketball. And those were my two main sports growing up, was baseball and basketball. And I called at my freshman year, I probably called nearly 30 or 40 high school baseball or basketball games over the course of the season. Maybe that's a little bit too big of a number, but I called a lot of those, and obviously baseball is my passion. My end goal, being in the media field, I'd love to make it Major League. I know there's only 30 teams, there's only 30 play-by-play guys, but that's a good end goal for me to have. But then if I could make it to that stage or get just below it, that would also be kind of cool, is to go around during the winters and travel a little bit with the Fox crews or similar situation, and call basketball, because I know that sport pretty well too. But yeah, Major League Baseball is my ultimate end goal, being in this profession. Now, I do have a summer internship here along with my 80s play-by-play and scoring, that I'm also a multimedia reporter for the TV station in North Platte. And so that's giving me another opportunity to get work in another aspect of media, because if the Major League Baseball side doesn't really work out, then my end goal would be to be like an on-air personality for a news station or something like that. But yeah, being in sports media, it's a sacrifice, because you have to work holidays, weekends, long days, evenings. But not being a player anymore, that kind of hurts me, because I still feel like I'm capable. I'm able to go physically play on a similar level, but my playing days are almost all but over. I'm going to try and maybe play some club ball while I'm in college, but being able to just stay around the sport in a more, I guess, intricate way. Like you guys mentioned when we were kind of detailing what I do go talk with the players, and I've become some acquainted type friends with a couple of our players, and I hope the best for all of them. So just being able to do that, and Brandon's career is kind of what I want to take mine to. He went to college at Butler. He went to I believe minor league baseball, and then he got a job with Georgia Tech, and then finally got the Fox job with basketball, and now he's here with the Braves. If I could progress kind of like that and go college to minor leagues, if I can get enough experience, maybe the upper levels of the minor league, before finally being able to test the waters of the higher up, that would be probably the best way to go. But yeah, Brandon Gaudin is a big inspiration for me to take my career down a certain way. But yeah, play-by-play, if I could do the Braves job, that would be a dream come true. But any Major League Baseball would be amazing.
One of the things I try to ask everybody is, we have subtitled this podcast Stories from the Pecos League. You're in the press box. You've watched a ton of Pecos League baseball. What's your favorite story about something that's gone on the field or you've experienced this year so far?
Oh, goodness. Well, I'll start my thinking process by saying this. My job as a broadcaster is to tell a story.
Exactly.
And so that's been preached to me by my professors and everybody else I've talked to, is baseball especially. You can tell stories, and that was kind of the treat with having Evan up in the booth Thursday night. Was while the game was going on, we were having full-fledged conversations about the 1950s in baseball. And then I'd butt in just for a second and say, here's the count. And then we'd go back to the story. I'd have to say the last two games against Santa Fe before the long road trip and the current homestand we're on, it was a Monday, Tuesday. We had a quick 2-game homestand against Santa Fe, which is a team that we had capability to play with and pick up a couple of wins. The second night, I think we were down by 1 run or something. And one of our new guys, Sean Bennett, comes up to the plate with the bases loaded. And I remember being on the call, and I said something about a walk would be an RBI. And then he tattoos this ball 350 out to right field for a grand slam, his second hit in an 80s uniform, and his first home run. That was actually the first home run for the North Platte 80s at their home ballpark.
Oh my gosh.
In the month of July. And on the day, Sean Bennett was then up to 6 RBI because he had driven in 2 runs earlier in the game. And so I remember going throughout the rest of that game going, there's no way we lose this one. And we ended up pulling out the win. And my dad stuck his head out the window post-game and yelled at Sean, come up here. We need to interview you. And so that was my first post-game interview on the Pecos League TV stream. And the last thing I'll say about this story is I got Sean sat down, I got the microphone in front of him, and I asked him, what was it like hitting the home run? And he said, it was good. I'm glad to be here. I'm glad to be part of a team that wants to play the right way. And every question I asked him, he kept saying, I'm glad to be here. I'm enjoying my time here. I want to be a part of this. And so just seeing the smile on his face for being a part of the interview, for the game he had, that was really rewarding. But yeah, that's probably one of the best stories I can tell you right now from this season. So yeah, that was a fun day. It was good to get a quick 2-game sweep at home and bolster kind of the home support before this long homestand that's being cut short by rain yesterday. But yeah, that was probably the best story The video is actually out there on the North Platte Facebook. And
nice.
I got really excited when he hit that home run because that was the first one for the 80s at home. So
this has been a fantastic interview with Harmon. He's given us a lot of great insight into what goes on in the press box, some work with official scoring and whatnot. And if you want more information on the Pecos League schedule, check out their website at pecosleague.com. You can catch all the action at pecosleague.tv as well. And finally, if you're a hardcore baseball fan, you need to join the Society for American Baseball Research, the premier baseball community. Offering an amazing baseball buffet of options to explore your fandom, SABR boasts more than 35 different research committees, over 70 regional chapters, and innumerable opportunities to connect with baseball minds across the world. For more information, go to sabr.org/join today. Hey, Evan, great job out there today, my man.
Thanks. Well, it's just been so much fun to be doing our 10th show. The Pecos League wraps up in 2 weeks. We've got at least one other show to go. And the North Platte 80s, they've turned around. They've won 6 of their last 10 games. They're hoping to catch Santa Fe and the Pecos, Texas Bills in the standings. There's still an outside chance to snag the last wild card spot. We'll see how things go tonight when they face the Trinidad Triggers, and I'm going to see Harmon at Bill Wood Field. Maybe he'll let me sneak into the press box again for a couple of innings.
Yeah, we'll make that happen.
Nice. All right, well, for Evan Katz, for Harmon Johnsen, I'm Bruce McClure. I want to thank everybody for listening, and we'll talk to you next week.